Before sleep arrives, before your thoughts drift into dreams, there is a quiet moment where you simply exist. You are sitting or lying down, feeling the gentle pressure of the world beneath you. The chair holds you. The floor supports the chair. The earth supports everything. And yet, this support is not solid in the way it seems. It is not only the strength of wood or stone that keeps you in place. There is another presence here. A silent force that has been with you since the moment you were born. Gravity. You rarely notice it. It does not make a sound. It does not glow or shimmer. It does not announce itself the way wind rustles leaves or rain taps against a window. Gravity is quieter than all of these things. And yet it is everywhere. Right now, as you rest, gravity gently pulls every part of you toward the center of the earth. Your hands feel their weight. Your arms relax downward. Your body settles naturally into stillness. This sensation of weight is so familiar that it almost disappears from awareness. But imagine noticing it for the first time. Imagine you have just arrived on this planet, stepping softly onto its surface. You would immediately feel it, that gentle downward pull. Not painful. Not heavy. Just steady. Like an invisible hand guiding you to stay close to the ground. Gravity is often described as a force. But it can also be imagined as something softer. Something more like a thread. An invisible thread woven through every object in the universe. This thread connects you to the earth. It connects the moon to the earth. It connects the earth to the sun. And the sun itself is tied to billions of stars drifting through the galaxy. Nothing is truly separate. Everything is quietly connected by gravity's gentle pull. If you drop a small object, perhaps a coin or a pen, it falls. Not because it wants to fall. Not because the earth is reaching up to grab it. But because the invisible thread between the object and the planet pulls them together. Slowly at first. Then faster. Until the object meets the ground. This simple motion is something you have seen thousands of times. Yet behind it lies one of the deepest ideas in science. Every object with mass attracts every other object with mass. Even you. Even the smallest pebble. Even a grain of sand. You are pulling on the earth right now. And the earth is pulling on you. Of course, the earth is much larger. Its gravity is strong. Yours is very small. But the connection exists all the same. Like two dancers connected by a thread, gently tugging on one another. Long ago, people wondered why things fall. Some believed objects fall simply because they belong on the ground. But centuries ago, a curious thinker named Isaac Newton began to see something deeper. He noticed that the same force that pulls an apple downward might also pull the moon. At first this idea sounded strange. How could the moon, floating so far away, be influenced by the same force that makes fruit fall from trees? But when Newton did the mathematics, the pattern appeared. The moon is not simply floating in space. It is falling. Constantly. But it is also moving sideways through space at the same time. So instead of crashing into Earth, it keeps missing the planet again and again. This endless falling becomes what we call an orbit. And suddenly gravity becomes something much larger than falling apples. It becomes the invisible architecture of the universe. Planets orbit stars. Moons orbit planets. Galaxies swirl around invisible centers of gravity. Without gravity, none of these cosmic patterns would exist. The universe would look completely different. Even here on Earth, gravity quietly shapes the world around you. It keeps the oceans in their basins. It keeps rivers flowing downhill. It gives mountains their weight and their slow erosion over time. Rain falls because gravity calls each droplet downward. Snowflakes drift gently through the sky because gravity guides their descent. Even your body is shaped by gravity. Your bones grow strong because they carry weight. Your muscles develop because they work against gravity's pull. Astronauts who live in space for months experience something unusual. Without gravity pressing on their bodies, their bones slowly lose density. Their muscles weaken. Because without gravity, the body no longer needs to resist the gentle downward force. Gravity, in a quiet way, keeps your body strong. But gravity does something even more subtle. It gives the world a direction. Down. Without gravity, there would be no clear sense of up or down. Those words would lose their meaning. When you place a cup on a table, it stays there because gravity anchors it. When you walk across a room, your feet stay connected to the ground. When you breathe, the air around you remains close to Earth because gravity holds the atmosphere like a soft blanket around the planet. It is easy to overlook this invisible thread. But it is always there. Holding oceans. Holding mountains. Holding cities. Holding you. Gravity is patient. It does not rush. It simply continues its quiet work, moment after moment, century after century. It has done so for billions of years. The same gentle force that holds you now once held the dust that formed our planet. It guided tiny grains of matter together until they slowly became Earth. And it still guides every falling leaf, every rolling stone, every drifting cloud. So before imagining a universe without gravity, take one more moment to feel its presence. Feel the weight of your body. Feel the steady support beneath you. That quiet pressure is gravity's signature. A soft reminder that you are connected to this planet. Connected to the moon above. Connected to the distant stars. All through invisible threads stretching across space. And yet, as calm and dependable as gravity seems, a curious thought begins to form. What would happen if, just for a moment, those invisible threads simply vanished? If gravity, the silent architect of the universe, suddenly stopped pulling at all, the ground beneath you would still exist. The air would still surround you. But the rules of motion, the quiet rules that have guided every falling leaf and every orbiting moon, would suddenly change. And in the very first second without gravity, the world would begin to behave in ways no human has ever truly experienced. Now imagine the moment arriving quietly. There is no warning. No thunder in the sky. No flash of light across the horizon. No sudden sound that signals change. Gravity simply stops. For billions of years it has been present everywhere, shaping every motion, guiding every falling leaf, every drifting cloud, every orbiting moon. And then, in a single instant, the invisible thread loosens. At first, you might not notice. The room around you still looks the same. The walls are still standing. The air still surrounds you. But something subtle has changed. Your body no longer feels the gentle downward pull that has always guided it toward the earth. For a tiny fraction of a second, your mind tries to interpret the sensation. It feels unfamiliar, strange. Your muscles, which are used to resisting gravity every moment of your life, suddenly relax. Your weight disappears. You are no longer pressing into the surface beneath you. Instead, something curious happens. You begin to drift. Not quickly, not dramatically, just gently, like a leaf that has lost contact with the ground. Your body slowly rises from the place where it rested. The chair beneath you drifts too. Because gravity is not only gone for you, it is gone for everything. The table, the books, the glass of water resting nearby. All objects that were once anchored to the earth now share the same strange freedom. Nothing is falling anymore, because falling itself no longer exists. For something to fall, gravity must pull it downward. Without gravity, motion becomes different. Objects continue moving only if something pushes them. This is one of the quiet rules of physics. A rule first described by Isaac Newton. Objects in motion stay in motion unless something stops them. Objects at rest stay at rest unless something moves them. For most of your life, gravity has been that constant something. It has always been there, gently pulling everything downward. But now that pull has vanished. So the world becomes still in a new and unfamiliar way. A cup that once rested on a table no longer presses into the wood. If the table shifts even slightly, the cup begins to float beside it. A drop of water lifted into the air remains suspended like a tiny crystal sphere. Even dust particles begin drifting through the room like slow-moving stars. The air itself begins to behave differently. Normally, warm air rises and cool air sinks because gravity helps guide that movement. But now the air loses its sense of direction. Tiny currents swirl gently in all directions. Breathing feels unusual too. Your lungs still expand and contract, drawing air inward and pushing it out again. But the familiar feeling of weight inside your chest has softened. Everything feels lighter, freer, almost dreamlike. Your hair drifts slowly upward. Your arms float beside you with no effort at all. If you move your hand gently, your entire body begins to rotate slowly in the air. Astronauts experience something similar in space. Inside spacecraft orbiting Earth, gravity is not completely gone. But the astronauts are falling around the planet in a continuous orbit. This creates the feeling of weightlessness. It is often called microgravity. But what you are experiencing now is even stranger. This is not microgravity. This is the complete absence of gravity everywhere. And the effects are only beginning. Look around the room again. Objects that were carefully placed on shelves begin to drift away. A book slides gently upward. A pen slowly rotates in midair. Curtains that once hung downward now float softly like fabric underwater. Nothing is anchored anymore. But something even more surprising begins to happen outside. Beyond the walls of your home. Beyond the streets and buildings of the city. across the entire surface of the planet. Because gravity was not only holding you down, it was holding everything down. The oceans, the lakes, the rivers. Right now, water across the world is beginning to respond to the change. At first, the movement is almost invisible. A slight lifting at the edges of waves. A strange stillness in the tides. Then slowly, quietly, the water begins to rise. Without gravity pulling it toward the center of Earth, the oceans lose their anchor. The surface of the sea begins to loosen. Tiny droplets lift upward. Foam drifts from the tops of waves. Soon entire layers of ocean water begin floating gently toward the sky. But this transformation is not sudden. Water has mass. And inertia keeps it moving in the directions it was already traveling. Waves continue rolling for a time. Currents continue flowing. But slowly, the shape of the ocean begins to change. It begins to spread outward. Upward. Free from the pull that once held it close to the planet. Meanwhile, back where you drift quietly in the air, your thoughts may begin to wander. There is something peaceful about this strange weightlessness. Your body moves with almost no effort. The world feels softer, less heavy, almost like a dream where the rules of motion have become gentle and forgiving. But gravity was never only about weight. It was also about stability. It gave the world its structure. Without it, every object is free. Free to drift. Free to wander. Free to leave the places where it once belonged. The ground beneath you still exists. But it no longer holds you. And across the entire planet, the oceans are beginning a slow, silent journey upward. Rivers that once rushed downhill will soon forget the meaning of downhill entirely. Lakes will loosen their edges. And the great blue seas that cover most of Earth will begin to float toward the open sky. Because without gravity, the oceans themselves are about to rise. As gravity fades from the universe, the first changes feel small and quiet. Inside a room, objects drift gently. Outside, leaves float slowly upward from the ground. Dust rises into the air like tiny wandering stars. But far beyond these small motions, something immense is beginning to change. Across the surface of Earth, the oceans are responding. The oceans cover most of this planet. They are deep, powerful, and ancient. For billions of years they have rested inside vast basins carved into Earth's surface. Gravity has always held them there. It has pressed every drop of water gently downward toward the center of the planet, keeping seas in their place and guiding rivers along their paths. But now that quiet pull is gone. At first, the water does not immediately rush away. Water has mass, and mass carries momentum. The waves that were rolling across the ocean a moment ago continue to roll. The tides that were rising and falling along the shores continue their slow rhythm for a short time. But something subtle is happening beneath the surface. Without gravity, the ocean is no longer being held tightly against the earth. It begins to loosen. Imagine a blanket that was once tucked firmly around a sleeping child. If the edges are slowly released, the blanket begins to lift and shift. The oceans begin to behave in a similar way. The surface of the sea becomes smoother. Waves lose the pull that once guided them downward. The foam on their crests lifts gently into the air. Tiny droplets detach and drift upward like scattered beads of glass. In places where the sea is calm, the surface begins to rise slowly, almost invisibly. It is not a violent eruption. There are no towering explosions of water. Instead, the ocean begins a quiet transformation. The water expands outward and upward, slowly detaching from the planet that once held it. Along coastlines, the changes become more visible. Beaches that once sloped gently toward the sea begin to look strange. The waterline becomes uncertain. Instead of pressing against the shore, the sea begins lifting away from it. Small pools form in the air just above the sand. Droplets gather together into floating spheres. Without gravity to pull them downward, water behaves differently. Surface tension, the same force that forms tiny beads of rain on a window, becomes more important. Droplets merge into larger floating shapes. Globes of water drift slowly upward. Near rivers, something equally curious is happening. Rivers have always flowed downhill. Their movement depends on gravity guiding them from high places to low ones. But now there is no downhill. The concept itself disappears. Water that once rushed through valleys and around stones begins to slow. The current weakens. Then gradually, the river loses its path entirely. Streams that once carved their way across landscapes begin to unravel. Water lifts gently from the riverbed. Sections of the river separate into drifting ribbons. Soon the flowing river becomes a chain of floating shapes, suspended in the air like translucent sculptures. Lakes behave in a similar way. Across the world, thousands of lakes rest quietly in natural basins. Without gravity holding them in place, the water begins to lift from their surfaces. At first, thin layers of mist-like droplets rise into the air. Then larger portions of water follow. The lake slowly loses its familiar shape. What was once a flat, reflective surface becomes a floating mass of liquid drifting upward. Even the deepest parts of the ocean cannot resist this change. Far below the surface, where darkness has always surrounded the seafloor, enormous volumes of water begin to shift. The pressure that once pushed downward through miles of ocean begins to fade. For countless deep-sea creatures, the environment begins to change in ways they have never experienced. The crushing weight of water above them softens. The ocean around them begins to expand and move. Slowly, quietly, the entire body of Earth's oceans is preparing to leave the surface of the planet. It does not happen instantly. Water is vast and heavy. Even without gravity pulling it down, it takes time for such enormous masses to drift away. But the direction is clear. Upward. Across the world, billions of tons of seawater are beginning a slow migration into the sky. From space, the view of Earth would begin to look different. The familiar deep blue surface would start to blur. Cloud-like shapes of floating water would form above the planet. These would not be clouds of vapor, like the ones you see in the sky today. They would be enormous drifting collections of liquid water. Giant floating oceans, slowly separating from the world that once held them. Meanwhile, something else begins to change. The tides. For as long as humans have watched the sea, the tides have followed a steady rhythm. The oceans rise and fall gently along coastlines every day. This motion is guided by gravity too. The moon's gravity pulls on Earth's oceans, lifting the water slightly as our planet rotates. The sun contributes as well, shaping the pattern of tides across the globe. But now gravity has vanished. The moon no longer pulls on the seas. The sun no longer influences the tides. The quiet rhythm that has guided coastal life for millions of years fades away. The oceans are no longer rising and falling. They are simply drifting. Free. Weightless. Untethered from the planet below. Back where you drift softly through the quiet air, you might begin to notice something unusual outside your window. The sky looks different. Shimmering shapes of water begin to appear above the horizon. Tiny droplets first. Then larger floating pools. Eventually enormous drifting masses of ocean water rise silently into the atmosphere. The planet that was once called the Blue World is beginning to lose its seas. And yet the oceans were not the only thing gravity held close to Earth. There is something even more important surrounding the planet. Something invisible. Something you depend on every moment. The air itself. Because gravity does not only hold oceans to the surface of the world. It also holds the entire atmosphere, the vast ocean of air you breathe, gently wrapped around the planet. And now, just like the water, that atmosphere is beginning to loosen its grip. And slowly, silently, the air itself will begin to slip away into space. As the oceans slowly rise away from the surface of the Earth, another, more delicate change begins to unfold. It is something you cannot see clearly at first. It has no color of its own, no shape that your eyes can easily follow. And yet it surrounds you constantly. It fills every breath you take. It moves softly across landscapes as wind. It carries the scent of rain, the warmth of sunlight, the coolness of evening air. This invisible ocean is the atmosphere. For your entire life, it has rested gently around the planet like a soft blanket. Held in place by gravity. Gravity presses the air toward Earth, layer by layer, creating the atmosphere that protects and sustains life. The air closest to the ground is thick and rich with oxygen and nitrogen. Above it, the atmosphere becomes gradually thinner. Higher still, the air becomes so light that it blends slowly into the emptiness of space. But even those highest layers remain loosely tied to Earth by gravity's patient pull. Until now. Because when gravity disappears, that invisible thread holding the atmosphere in place quietly dissolves. At first, the air seems unchanged. You inhale. Your lungs expand gently. Oxygen flows into your bloodstream just as it always has. The sky still stretches above you, pale blue and calm. But something subtle has begun. Without gravity pulling it downward, the atmosphere is no longer anchored to the planet. Each molecule of air, every tiny particle of oxygen and nitrogen now moves freely. Not falling. Not rising. Simply drifting. At ground level, the change is slow. Air does not rush away in a sudden storm. There is no great wind tearing across the planet. Instead, the atmosphere begins a quiet migration. Imagine a mist slowly lifting from a lake in the early morning. The movement is gentle, almost unnoticeable. Yet over time, the mist fades into the sky. The atmosphere begins to behave in a similar way. Tiny molecules drift upward. Not pulled by gravity anymore, they wander gradually towards space. At first, the difference is almost impossible to notice. The air still surrounds you. You can still breathe. But high above the planet, the outer edges of the atmosphere begin to expand. The upper layers of air slowly loosen and spread outward. Gravity once acted like a gentle hand, keeping these layers close. Without that hand, the atmosphere begins to stretch into the darkness of space. This process would not happen instantly. Air molecules move quickly, bouncing and colliding with one another in constant motion. Even now, long before this imaginary moment, a few of them occasionally escape Earth's gravity and drift into space. But normally gravity pulls most of them back. Now, nothing calls them home. One by one, countless molecules wander away from the planet. Some drift slowly upward. Others move sideways, carried by gentle currents. Eventually, many of them slip beyond the edge of Earth's atmosphere entirely. And once they reach the emptiness of space, they simply continue traveling. Forever. As the atmosphere begins to thin, the sky itself starts to change. During the day, the blue color of the sky exists because sunlight interacts with the air. Light from the sun enters the atmosphere and scatters off tiny molecules of gas. Blue wavelengths scatter more easily than red ones, painting the sky with its familiar color. But as the air slowly fades away, there are fewer molecules to scatter that light. The blue sky begins to lose its brightness. The color softens. Pale blue becomes faint. Faint blue becomes almost transparent. Eventually the sky would darken, slowly revealing the deep black of space even during the daytime. Stars would begin to appear faintly against the daylight sky. Something else begins to disappear too. Sound. Sound travels through air as waves of pressure moving from one molecule to the next. When someone speaks, the vibrations of their voice ripple through the atmosphere until they reach your ears. Wind rustles leaves because moving air carries those vibrations. Thunder rolls across the sky because air transmits the energy of lightning's sudden heat. But as the atmosphere thins, sound loses its path. Fewer molecules mean fewer connections between vibrations. Voices would become quieter. Distant sounds would fade more quickly. Eventually, as the air grows thin enough, sound itself would struggle to travel at all. The world would become quieter than it has ever been. A deep, almost cosmic silence would settle across the planet. Meanwhile, high above Earth, enormous clouds of ocean water continue drifting into the sky. The oceans and the atmosphere, the two great fluids of our planet, are both slowly leaving. Earth begins to resemble something unfamiliar. Not the blue world seen from space, but a dry sphere surrounded by drifting water and thinning air. Life on the planet would begin to feel these changes quickly. Plants rely on carbon dioxide from the air. Animals rely on oxygen. As the atmosphere slowly escapes into space, breathing would eventually become more difficult. But the atmosphere is vast. Even as it drifts away, the process takes time. For a while, the air remains thick enough for life to continue. For a while, the sky still glows faintly blue. For a while, you can still take a quiet breath. Yet above you, the great envelope of air surrounding the planet continues expanding outward. And as it spreads into space, another ancient relationship begins to change. Far above Earth, the moon continues its steady orbit. For billions of years it has circled our planet, guided by gravity's invisible thread. But now that thread has vanished. The moon no longer feels Earth's pull. And slowly, quietly, the moon begins to drift away from the world it has accompanied for eons. Soon, the familiar glow of the moon in the night sky will begin a silent and irreversible journey into darkness. Far above the drifting oceans and thinning air, another quiet story is unfolding. It happens slowly, almost too gently to notice at first. If you look upward into the fading sky, you might still see the moon. For as long as humans have existed, the moon has been a constant companion in the night. It rises softly over distant horizons. It glows pale and steady among the stars. Sometimes it appears as a thin silver crescent. Other nights it becomes a perfect circle of light, bathing the earth in a cool glow. But the moon is not simply hanging in the sky. It is moving. Always moving. For billions of years, the moon has been falling toward Earth. Yet it never reaches the planet. Instead, it continues missing Earth again and again, tracing a wide circular path around it. This graceful motion is called an orbit. And the quiet force guiding that orbit has always been gravity. Gravity pulls the moon inward toward Earth. At the same time, the moon moves sideways through space. These two motions combine to create a delicate balance. The moon falls toward Earth but never quite reaches it. Instead, it circles endlessly around the planet. It is a cosmic dance that has lasted for more than 4 billion years. But now gravity has disappeared. And without gravity, the dance ends. At the very instant gravity vanishes, the moon no longer feels Earth's pull. The invisible thread connecting the two worlds quietly dissolves. For a moment, nothing seems different. The moon still hangs in the sky. But something fundamental has changed. The curved path of its orbit no longer exists. The moon continues moving in the direction it was already traveling. But instead of circling Earth, it now moves in a straight line. This is one of the simplest rules of motion in the universe. Without a force pulling an object into a curve, it continues forward in a straight path. So the moon begins drifting away. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. But steadily. Silently. Imagine a stone tied to a string, spinning gently in a circle. If the string suddenly breaks, the stone flies outward in a straight direction. The moon's escape is similar, though much slower and more graceful. From Earth, the change would be difficult to notice at first. The moon would still rise in the sky. It would still appear almost normal during the first hours after gravity disappears. But over time, careful observation would reveal something unusual. The moon would begin drifting away from its familiar position. Its path across the sky would slowly change. The predictable rhythm of moonrise and moonset would fade. Soon the moon would appear in places where it had never been before. Gradually, the distance between Earth and the moon would grow. The glowing disk in the sky would begin to shrink. Night after night, the moon would look slightly smaller, slightly farther away, until eventually it would become just another bright point of light among the stars. The moon's departure would change more than the night sky. For billions of years, the moon has shaped the Earth in subtle but powerful ways. Its gravity pulls on the oceans, creating the tides. Twice each day, the seas rise and fall gently along the coasts. This steady rhythm has guided marine life for millions of years. Entire ecosystems depend on the tides. Without the moon's gravity, those tides would disappear. But in this strange new world without gravity, the tides had already begun fading. The oceans themselves were drifting into the sky. Still, the moon's influence extends even deeper. It helps stabilize the tilt of Earth's rotation. Our planet spins slightly tilted on its axis. This tilt gives us the seasons spring, summer, autumn, and winter. The moon acts like a quiet stabilizer, keeping the tilt relatively steady over long periods of time. Without the moon, Earth's tilt could eventually wobble more dramatically. But now that possibility no longer matters. Because gravity itself is gone. The cosmic relationships that once shaped planets and moons are dissolving everywhere. From your quiet place drifting above the ground, you might look toward the horizon as evening arrives. The sky, already darker from the thinning atmosphere, reveals more stars than you have ever seen before. And there, slowly drifting away, is the moon. It still shines softly. Its familiar craters and shadows still form the patterns humans have imagined for centuries. Some saw a rabbit in its markings. Others saw a face. Some saw stories of gods and travelers written across its surface. But now the moon is becoming a traveler itself. A silent wanderer leaving the world behind. Without gravity to guide it, the moon will never return. It will continue drifting through space for millions, perhaps billions, of years. Passing quietly among the planets. Then eventually beyond them. Back where it came from, into the deep wandering of the universe. And as the moon slowly fades into the darkness, another change begins much closer to home. Because gravity was not only holding the moon in orbit, it was also holding the Earth itself together. Deep inside the planet, enormous layers of rock and metal are pressed tightly by gravity's inward pull. The immense pressure of Earth's own weight keeps its core dense and its surface solid. But without gravity pressing everything inward, those layers will begin to relax. The mountains, the crust, the deep molten core, all of them are part of a structure built by gravity. And now that structure is beginning to loosen. Slowly, quietly, the planet beneath you is about to experience something it has never felt before. For the first time since its formation billions of years ago, the Earth itself will begin to come apart. Up to this moment, most of the changes you have imagined happen around the Earth. The oceans drift upward. The atmosphere thins and slips slowly into space. The moon quietly leaves its ancient orbit. But now the story turns inward. Because gravity does not only hold things onto the planet, it also holds the planet together. The Earth is not a simple solid ball like a stone. It is a layered world. Beneath the soil and forests and cities lies a thick crust of rock. Below that crust is the mantle, a vast ocean of hot, slowly flowing stone. Deeper still lies the outer core, a churning sea of molten iron and nickel. And at the very center sits the inner core, a dense sphere of metal as hot as the surface of the sun. All of these layers exist in delicate balance. Gravity presses them inward, pulling every piece of the planet toward its center. This inward pressure is enormous. It is what keeps the deep layers compressed and tightly packed together. The weight of all the rock above pushes down on the layers below. Imagine stacking countless mountains on top of one another. The pressure at the bottom would become immense. Inside Earth, that pressure is millions of times stronger. It squeezes the core into a dense sphere and holds the mantle tightly against it. But now gravity is gone. And without gravity, the pressure holding these layers together begins to fade. At first, the change is subtle. The rocks beneath the surface still hold their shape. Mountains still stand. The ground beneath you still appears solid. But deep inside the earth, something important is beginning to happen. The crushing pressure that once pressed everything inward is slowly disappearing. It is like releasing the lid from a tightly sealed container. The contents do not explode outward instantly. Instead, they begin to relax. The same process begins inside the planet. Rocks that were once squeezed tightly together begin to loosen slightly. Tiny spaces open between mineral grains. Deep layers of molten rock begin to expand. The mantle, which normally flows slowly like thick honey, now begins to behave differently. Without gravity pushing down on it, the mantle loses some of its density. It spreads outward gently. The enormous pressure surrounding the core fades as well. For billions of years, the inner core has remained solid because the immense pressure squeezed it into that state. Despite its incredible temperature, the pressure kept it dense and compact. But now that pressure begins to disappear. The core begins to change. The molten metal of the outer core slowly expands. The inner core, once tightly compressed, begins to relax as well. These changes happen gradually. The Earth does not shatter in a dramatic explosion. Instead, the planet begins to lose the forces that kept it tightly bound. At the surface, the effects slowly become visible. Mountains begin to feel different. Their massive weight once pressed them firmly against the crust. Now that weight has vanished. The towering peaks that once pushed downward into the earth begin to loosen. Small fractures open in the rock. Cliffs become unstable. Pieces of stone drift gently upward into the air. The ground itself no longer presses downward with force. Loose soil lifts slowly away from the surface. Dust drifts upward like fine powder in sunlight. The crust of the earth, the thin outer shell where all life exists, begins to separate slightly from the mantle beneath it. Normally, gravity keeps the crust tightly wrapped around the deeper layers of the planet. Without that pull, the crust relaxes. Large sections of rock begin to drift apart. Tectonic plates, which once moved slowly across the surface, now lose the forces guiding their motion. They begin to float freely, like enormous rafts of stone. Meanwhile, the oceans have already begun their slow departure into the sky. With the weight of water gone, the pressure on the ocean floor decreases even further. The crust beneath the seas begins to rise gently. The shape of the planet slowly changes. Earth was once almost perfectly round because gravity pulled all its mass inward evenly. But without gravity maintaining that shape, the planet begins to relax outward. The surface becomes uneven. Sections of crust drift slightly away from the center. The mantle expands beneath them. The boundaries between layers grow softer and less defined. The Earth is no longer a tightly bound sphere. It is becoming something looser, something less stable. From space, the planet would begin to look unusual. The familiar blue and green world would appear blurred by drifting oceans and thinning atmosphere. Large pieces of the crust might slowly lift away from the surface. Islands of rock floating gently above the expanding mantle. It would look almost like the Earth is unraveling. Not violently, but quietly. Piece by piece. Even the magnetic field of the planet would begin to weaken. Deep inside Earth, the churning motion of molten metal in the outer core normally generates a powerful magnetic field. This invisible shield protects the planet from harmful radiation from the sun. But without gravity maintaining the structure of the core, that motion would slowly change. The magnetic field would begin to fade. The invisible shield around the Earth would weaken. Yet all of these changes, vast as they are, remain small compared to what is happening on a larger scale. Because gravity does not only hold planets together, it also governs the motion of those planets around stars. Right now, even as the Earth slowly loosens and drifts, it is still moving through space. For billions of years, our planet has traveled in a graceful path around the sun. That path exists because gravity pulls the Earth inward while its motion carries it forward. Together, those two forces create an orbit. But gravity is gone now. And without gravity, the path around the sun can no longer exist. The Earth, along with every other planet in the solar system, is about to lose its orbit. And soon the quiet dance of worlds around the sun will come to an end. For billions of years, the solar system has moved with quiet precision. Planets circle the sun in wide, graceful paths. Mercury races along its tight orbit close to the sun's heat. Venus glides through its glowing path like a bright lantern in the sky. Earth follows its familiar route through the seasons. Farther out, Mars wanders across the red dust of space. And beyond the inner planets, the great giants drift slowly along their immense journeys: Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. Each of these worlds follows a path that was shaped long ago when the solar system formed. Those paths are called orbits. An orbit is not a road carved into space. There are no invisible rails guiding planets forward. Instead, an orbit is a delicate balance between motion and gravity. Every planet moves forward through space at tremendous speed. Earth, for example, travels around the sun at about 100,000 kilometers per hour. That motion carries the planet forward like a stone thrown through the air. But gravity pulls inward at the same time. The sun's enormous mass bends the path of each planet slightly toward itself. The result is a curve. Instead of flying straight away into space, planets fall gently around the sun, endlessly missing it, endlessly circling it. It is a cosmic dance, a quiet choreography written in gravity. But now gravity has vanished. And when gravity disappears, that dance comes to an end. At the exact moment gravity fades, the sun no longer pulls on the planets. The invisible strings that guided their motion are suddenly cut. But the planets do not stop moving. They continue traveling at the same speeds they already had. Motion does not require gravity. Once something is moving, it keeps moving unless a force changes its path. And now there is no force left to guide the planets into curves. So each world begins traveling in a straight line. Earth leaves its orbit instantly. Not with a jolt. Not with an explosion. but with quiet certainty. The curved path around the sun simply dissolves, and the planet continues forward into space along the direction it was already traveling. From the surface of Earth, this change would not feel dramatic at first. The sun would still appear in the sky. Day and night would still continue for a time as the planet rotates. But something subtle would begin to change. The sun's position among the stars would shift slowly. Earth would no longer circle the sun once each year. Instead, the distance between the planet and the sun would begin to grow. Very slowly at first. Then steadily. The sun would appear slightly smaller with time. Its warmth would gradually weaken. Meanwhile, every other planet is undergoing the same transformation. Mercury speeds away from its tight path around the sun. Venus drifts free from the glowing orbit it once followed. Mars abandons the red curve that guided its ancient journey. Even the giant planets, Jupiter with its swirling storms, Saturn with its elegant rings, begin drifting away from the center of the solar system. Each world moves along its own straight path, like boats suddenly released from their moorings. Like leaves floating freely on a calm lake. The solar system begins to spread apart. Distances between planets grow wider with every passing hour. The familiar structure that once held these worlds together begins to dissolve. Imagine watching the solar system from far away. For billions of years, it would have looked like a carefully arranged system. The sun shining at the center. Planets tracing graceful loops around it. But now those loops unravel. Each planet becomes a traveler. A wandering world drifting into the vast darkness between stars. Some planets may pass near each other briefly as their paths cross. But without gravity, they cannot capture one another. They simply continue drifting. Endlessly. Silently. Across the enormous emptiness of space. Back on Earth, the sky would slowly transform. The sun would remain bright for a while, but its warmth would fade as the distance grows. The seasons would disappear. Spring, summer, autumn, and winter only exist because Earth moves around the sun at a steady distance. Without that orbit, the rhythm of the seasons dissolves. The sun becomes just another star in the sky. A very bright one at first, but slowly shrinking as Earth drifts farther into deep space. And Earth itself is not alone in this wandering. The moon has already left. The oceans have begun drifting into the sky. The atmosphere is fading into the vacuum of space. Now the planet itself is traveling into the darkness between stars. The solar system, once a quiet family of worlds bound together by gravity, is becoming a scattered collection of travelers. Planets drifting in different directions. Moons wandering alone. Asteroids and comets floating freely through space. The sun itself still burns at the center of where the solar system once existed. But it no longer holds its family close. Because gravity was the invisible force that kept everything together. Without it, the structure of the solar system cannot survive. And as the planets drift farther and farther away, something lonely begins to happen at the heart of it all. The sun, the brilliant star that once guided the motion of every world here, is about to find itself completely alone. And soon, in the quiet darkness of space, the sun will burn without its family of planets circling around it. Far behind you now, the familiar structure of the solar system is dissolving. For billions of years, the Sun stood at the center of a quiet cosmic family. Around it moved the planets, each following its patient path through space. Mercury darted close to the Sun's blazing heat. Venus glowed softly in the inner sky. Earth carried oceans, clouds, and life along its steady orbit. Farther away, the gas giants drifted through colder regions of space. Jupiter spun with immense storms larger than entire planets. Saturn carried its graceful rings like a crown of ice and stone. Beyond them, Uranus and Neptune traveled slowly along vast outer paths, circling the Sun across distances so large they are difficult to imagine. All of these worlds were once bound together by gravity. The Sun's enormous mass created a powerful curve in the fabric of space around it. That curve gently guided every planet, asteroid, and comet into orbit. Gravity acted like an invisible web holding the solar system together. But now that web has vanished. And one by one, the planets have slipped away. Mercury was the first to wander beyond its tight path. Venus followed soon after, gliding away from the Sun's warmth. Earth itself has already begun its quiet journey into deep space. Mars drifts outward as well, leaving behind the red orbit it followed for billions of years. Even the giant worlds, Jupiter and Saturn, have begun their slow departure. Their enormous mass once helped shape the architecture of the solar system. But without gravity, even these massive planets cannot remain. They continue traveling forward along straight, silent paths. The solar system begins to empty. If you could watch this transformation from far away, the change would feel almost poetic. A once organized system gradually dissolving. Worlds drifting apart like seeds carried by a gentle cosmic wind. And at the center of it all remains the Sun. The Sun does not disappear when gravity vanishes. It continues shining. Because the light and heat of the Sun come from something deeper than gravity alone. Inside the Sun, hydrogen atoms collide under immense pressure and heat. They fuse together to form helium. This process is called nuclear fusion. It releases enormous amounts of energy. That energy radiates outward as sunlight and warmth. Fusion continues as long as the Sun has fuel to burn. So the star itself remains bright and alive. Yet something profound has changed. The Sun no longer holds anything close. Its planets are gone. Its asteroids drift freely. Its comets wander into the darkness. The great gravitational family that once surrounded the Sun has quietly scattered. Imagine standing somewhere far out in space, watching the Sun from a distance. You would see a brilliant sphere of light glowing alone in the vast blackness. No planets circling it. No elegant orbital patterns. Just a single star shining in silence. The solar system has become something different now. It is no longer truly a system. It is simply a star surrounded by emptiness. This loneliness spreads outward as well. Many objects once traveled through the solar system on long, looping paths. Comets from distant icy regions occasionally fell toward the Sun, glowing with bright tails as sunlight warmed their frozen surfaces. Asteroids moved through stable belts between planets, following gravitational patterns shaped by the Sun and Jupiter. But without gravity, these structures disappear. Asteroids drift away in random directions. Comets abandon their looping paths and wander freely into deep space. Even the vast clouds of icy objects far beyond Neptune, known as the Oort cloud, slowly disperse. For billions of years, those distant objects were gently held in place by the sun's gravity. Now they scatter like dust in the wind. The sun continues shining, but its reach no longer gathers anything together. Its light travels outward across space, touching distant worlds and stars. But its gravitational embrace is gone. And so the sun becomes simply another star among billions. Meanwhile, the wandering planets continue their silent journeys through the galaxy. Earth drifts farther into the darkness. Its oceans already floating away. Its atmosphere fading into space. The moon long gone. The sun shrinking slowly behind it. The familiar warmth of sunlight becomes dimmer as the distance grows. Days still exist for a while as Earth continues rotating. But the sun in the sky grows smaller with time. Eventually, it becomes just another bright point among many. The sky, once shaped by the sun's presence, becomes deeper and darker. Stars fill the heavens in numbers few humans have ever seen. Without atmosphere scattering sunlight, the universe becomes clearer than it has ever appeared. But something larger is happening beyond this lonely star. Because gravity does not only hold solar systems together, it also shapes entire galaxies. Billions of stars swirl together in vast spirals, held by the same invisible force that once guided planets around the sun. Without gravity, those galaxies cannot remain intact. The structure of the universe itself begins to loosen. And soon, even the great spirals of stars will begin drifting apart. The story that began with oceans lifting from the Earth is now expanding across unimaginable distances. From planets, to stars, to entire galaxies. And the universe is about to grow far quieter than it has ever been before. Now, beyond the solar system, you drift even farther into the cosmos. The sun has lost its family of planets. Earth drifts alone, its oceans rising into the sky, its atmosphere thinning into space. The moon is gone. The solar system has become a scattering of wandering worlds. But the universe itself is still vast. Billions of stars shine across the black expanse. Many of these stars are not alone. They are gathered together into galaxies, immense collections of stars, gas, dust, and dark matter. Some are spiral galaxies, their stars tracing sweeping arms like glowing ribbons. Some are elliptical, round and dense, filled with countless bright points of light. Others are irregular, scattered, mysterious shapes, formed by chaotic interactions over billions of years. Gravity is the quiet artist that shapes all of these galaxies. It pulls stars toward a common center. It curves their paths, keeping them in endless, elegant motion. Without gravity, these gatherings of stars cannot hold together. Imagine a whirlpool in a stream. Water swirls in tight, circular motion. The currents and pressure keep everything in place. Now imagine the whirlpool suddenly loses the water's cohesion. Each droplet drifts freely, moving in straight lines into the surrounding space. This is what happens to galaxies when gravity disappears. Stars that were once bound together in a spiral begin drifting outward. Those in the inner arms, once circling quickly around a dense galactic center, lose their tight paths. Stars in the outer arms, which traveled more slowly, are no longer held in place. the spiral structure unravels. Billions of glowing points of light scatter across the emptiness. In an elliptical galaxy, the effect is equally profound. These galaxies were once dense clouds of stars orbiting a shared center in every direction. Without gravity, the stars lose their orbits. They begin moving independently, each tracing a straight line outward. Over time, the once smooth, glowing ellipses fade into a scattered collection of wandering lights. Even the largest structures in the universe are affected. Galactic clusters, enormous groups of galaxies bound together by gravity, begin to drift apart. Groups that once seemed permanent and stable slowly spread into the cosmic void. Gravity had been the glue holding these vast collections together. Now that glue has vanished. From Earth, looking outward, the sky grows stranger and quieter than ever. What was once a clear view of the Milky Way becomes diffuse. The familiar band of stars across the night sky begins to blur and thin. Galaxies in the distance, once bright and defined, become scattered, dim points of wandering light. Even light itself feels the effect in subtle ways. Stars that were once close together are now separating. Their photons travel across widening distances, creating an ever-growing emptiness between them. The universe spreads like an immense ocean, its light scattered, its structure dissolving. And yet, despite all this dispersal, the stars continue to shine. Fusion burns in their cores. Hydrogen fuses into helium. Energy radiates outward in light and heat. The stars live, even as their cosmic neighborhoods unravel. Imagine flying through one of these galaxies before gravity disappeared. You would see billions of stars moving together in rhythmic patterns. Spiral arms rotate slowly. Clusters spin gracefully around centers of mass. Gravity weaves every path, choreographing motion on unimaginable scales. Now, with gravity gone, that choreography ends. The stars drift apart, each following its initial velocity. No more curves, no more spirals, no more gentle rotation around a common center. They continue along straight lines, like distant travelers released into a boundless void. Time continues. Stars still evolve, live, and die. But the universe becomes quieter. Silent in a way no human could have imagined. No tidal pulls between galaxies. No orbital dances. No cosmic rhythm. Black holes, which once anchored surrounding stars, can no longer hold them. Their immense pull, invisible yet commanding, is no longer felt. Even these gravitational giants become powerless. Stars that once circled black holes drift away. Galactic centers, once dense and luminous, begin to empty. Clusters of galaxies, which had formed intricate filaments connecting the universe, unravel. Cosmic web-like structures fade as stars and galaxies drift into independent paths. The vast scaffold of matter that once gave the universe its shape slowly dissolves. As you drift through this expanding emptiness, the scale is difficult to comprehend. Distances grow unimaginably vast. Light years stretch endlessly. Billions of stars that once moved in harmony now wander alone. Yet amid this dispersal, there is a strange serenity. The chaos of movement has ceased. Stars move quietly, without collisions or disruptions. Each follows a straight path, steady and unhurried, across the dark canvas of space. The universe has grown larger, slower, and profoundly empty. And somewhere in this immense calm, you can imagine the Earth itself small, drifting, surrounded by a thinning atmosphere and oceans floating above its surface. The moon long gone. The sun fading in distance. Planets wandering alone. Galaxies, once magnificent spirals and ellipses, are now scattered clusters of isolated stars. The cosmic stage is emptying. The universe becomes a quiet ocean of wandering light, stretching in all directions. And yet, in the midst of this silent dispersal, something remains. Energy persists. Light continues to travel. Stars continue to shine. Even in the absence of gravity, the universe endures. But the rhythm, the structure, the interconnectedness that once defined cosmic order, all of it has dissolved. The familiar patterns of orbiting worlds, swirling galaxies, and clustered stars have disappeared into straight lines, drifting apart into the infinite darkness. From this vantage point, you begin to sense the vastness of it all. Not just the distances, but the profound quiet. A universe without gravity is a universe that has lost its invisible threads. And yet, the light of distant stars reminds you that something persists, that even in emptiness, there is a slow, gentle illumination, reaching across the cosmic void. And as you float here, contemplating the unraveling of galaxies, you begin to wonder, if gravity can vanish on such immense scales, shaping stars, galaxies, and clusters, what is it, really? What is the force that held it all together before? And why does it exist at all? The answer lies just beyond the next horizon, in the fabric of space itself. After drifting through a universe where gravity has vanished, you begin to turn your attention back to the question you once took for granted. Gravity, the invisible hand that shapes oceans, planets, and galaxies, seems so ordinary in daily life. You feel it every time your feet touch the ground, every time water flows downhill, every time the moon lights the night sky. And yet, after imagining a universe without it, you realize just how extraordinary it truly is. Gravity is not something you can see. It is not a color, a shape, or a substance you can touch. Instead, it is a subtle bending of the space around you, a curvature that tells matter how to move. Albert Einstein described it beautifully in his theory of general relativity. Mass anything with matter or energy curves the fabric of space itself. Imagine a stretched rubber sheet. If it is empty, it lies flat. Now place a heavy ball in the center. The sheet dips, creating a smooth, curved indentation around the weight. If you roll a smaller ball nearby, it naturally moves along the curve, spiraling toward the larger ball. It does not fall because of some invisible tug. It moves along the shape of the sheet. This is a simple analogy for how gravity works in the universe. In the cosmos, space itself is the rubber sheet. Stars, planets, and moons are the weights that bend it. Objects follow paths along these curves. Orbits, tides, and the motion of galaxies are all consequences of matter following the shapes of space. Now, after imagining the absence of gravity, this idea becomes even more striking. Without mass-bending space, objects no longer have curves to follow. Planets drift freely. Galaxies dissolve. Even light, which normally bends slightly around massive objects, moves in straight lines. Gravity is not just a force, it is the geometry of reality itself. This perspective allows you to see gravity differently. It is less like a pull and more like the invisible shape of the universe. Everything you have imagined drifting away, oceans, atmosphere, moons, planets, galaxies, is responding to the absence of that shape. Space has become flat, uncurved, and indifferent. Without the gentle dips and slopes created by mass, nothing is held together. Yet gravity is also a source of intimacy and connection. It links the Earth to its oceans. It binds the sun to its planets. It choreographs stars and their galaxies. It connects the vast and the minute, from the falling apple to the spiral of the Milky Way. It is a quiet conversation between matter and the fabric of space. You can feel it more personally too. Every step you take, every heartbeat, every breath, depends on this force. Without it, your body would drift apart. The fluids in your veins, the blood in your heart, the very organs in your body, all would scatter. Gravity is not only cosmic, it is intimate. It shapes your experience of the world from the moment you awaken to the moment you lie down at night. And yet, gravity is mysterious. We still do not fully understand why mass bends space in the first place. We can describe it mathematically, predict its effects with astonishing accuracy, and even detect its ripples across the universe. But the ultimate reason why there is a force that shapes space itself remains one of the deepest questions in science. Even more astonishing is that gravity is both weak and strong. On Earth, it is powerful enough to keep you grounded, yet comparatively feeble next to the forces inside atoms. In the core of stars, it is strong enough to ignite nuclear fusion, balancing heat and pressure to produce light and warmth. Across galaxies, it is powerful enough to hold billions of stars in elegant spirals. And yet, remove it entirely, as you have imagined, and the universe falls apart. This reflection brings a sense of wonder and humility. All that we have witnessed, oceans floating into the sky, moons drifting silently away, stars scattering across the universe, hinges on a single invisible property. It is easy to take for granted. And yet it is utterly extraordinary. You might even begin to notice gravity in small, poetic ways. The gentle pull of your fingers against a pen. The descent of a leaf from a tree. The curve of water in a glass. All these movements are whispers of the curvature of space, signs of the invisible geometry around you. If you could see gravity, it would be like viewing the shape of reality itself. Every planet, every star, every galaxy would leave a subtle imprint in the fabric of space. Paths and orbits, curves and slopes, invisible yet precise, guiding everything naturally along its trajectory. And as you imagine this, you realize how delicately balanced the universe truly is. Without gravity, we have seen, the cosmos becomes unbound. Planets drift, stars scatter, galaxies dissolve. But with gravity, the universe becomes an intricate dance of structure and motion. It connects the vast and the small, shaping everything you can see and touch. This understanding allows you to see yourself in a new light. You are not separate from this force. You are embedded within it. Your body, your home, your planet, the sun, and all the stars are participating in the same conversation of curved space. Every motion you make, every object you observe, is a response to the gentle shape of reality. And yet, for all its omnipresence, gravity is quiet. It does not shout or demand attention. It is subtle, persistent, and elegant. It is the thread that connects the universe, the invisible sculptor shaping stars, planets and galaxies, and holding together the very fabric of your existence. As you drift into this thought, the universe feels different. It is not just empty space. It is a vast, softly curved landscape. Every motion, every orbit, every rise and fall of oceans or planets is a response to these invisible contours. Gravity becomes less a force and more the geometry of the cosmos, a quiet, omnipresent presence that connects all things. And in this awareness, you begin to feel a gentle calm. You have witnessed a universe without gravity, a universe unraveling into emptiness. Now, you understand what holds it all together. You can imagine the pull beneath your feet, the bonds between oceans and planets, stars and galaxies. The universe is vast, yes, but it is beautifully ordered. And as you float through this contemplation, softly aware of your own body, your surroundings, and the unseen forces shaping them, you notice something comforting. Gravity is not just a force to hold things down. It is the subtle rhythm that allows life, motion, and wonder to exist. And in this moment, you drift gently toward the next thought. If gravity is the shape of space itself, what happens when it returns, and the universe begins to feel its pull once more? After drifting through a universe untethered, imagine, just for a moment, that gravity begins to return. Not with a sudden jolt or violent shock. It does not slam down upon the oceans or the scattered planets. Instead, it returns gently, quietly, like a soft breath pressing back into the fabric of space. You feel it first beneath your feet. A subtle tug, so familiar you almost do not notice it at first. Your body, which had been floating lightly, responds instantly. Your muscles relax as your weight returns. Every joint, every tendon, every fiber of your being reconnects with the pull toward the Earth's center. The sensation is intimate and comforting. You feel your own solidity, the reassuring connection between yourself and the planet. Look around. The world begins to settle. Oceans, which had drifted away, slowly begin to descend. They glide softly back into their basins, guided by the returning pull. No longer floating aimlessly, water spreads across valleys and fills riverbeds. The rhythm of tides resonates, gentle and steady, as if the planet had remembered its old song. The atmosphere follows next. Air, which had wandered into space, drifts downward, returning to embrace the Earth. The sky thickens once more with oxygen and nitrogen, wrapping the planet in its invisible, life-giving blanket. Clouds form, winds resume their slow dances, and the air carries familiar sounds, the whisper of leaves, the rustle of grasses, the quiet hum of life renewed. Even the crust of the earth responds to the returning force. Mountains, which had loosened slightly in the absence of gravity, regain their steadfast posture. Loose rocks settle, soil presses back into place, and the ground beneath you feels solid once more. The deep mantle relaxes into its dense form again, and the planet's layers re-establish their quiet structure. Look farther out. The moon, once a drifting wanderer, begins to feel the tug of Earth's gravity. It curves slightly in its path, as if remembering the endless, patient dance it had performed for billions of years. Its glow returns to a familiar rhythm in the night sky. The moon's silent companionship resonates, bringing a sense of continuity and cosmic comfort. Even the planets beyond Earth experience the gentle embrace of returning gravity. Orbits re-establish themselves, slowly and carefully. The sun regains its family, planets tracing graceful paths once more. The solar system returns to its ancient choreography, quiet and elegant. From far away, the universe seems to breathe again, its structure restored, its rhythm renewed. This restoration is not instantaneous. It is gradual, meditative, like the universe itself is sighing after a long, weightless pause. Objects that had been displaced slowly find their paths. The fabric of space feels curved once more, and matter responds naturally to its contours. You feel it in the simplest of ways. A leaf falls from a tree, tracing a familiar curve toward the earth. A drop of water slides down a leaf's edge. A stone, once floating aimlessly, lands softly in your hand. The world has returned to order, yet retains a sense of wonder, a reminder of what it was like without gravity. In this moment, everything feels interconnected. Oceans, skies, moons, planets all held together by the invisible curvature of space. The delicate rhythm of motion, the gentle pull beneath your feet, the dance of celestial bodies across the universe, all of it exists because of gravity. And you notice how intimately personal this force is. It is both cosmic and individual. It shapes stars and galaxies, yet it grounds your own body. It creates the tides that guide life on Earth, yet allows you to walk, to sit, to rest in the quiet comfort of your own weight. As gravity returns fully, the universe resumes its slow, elegant motion. Planets orbit the sun once again. Moons circle their planets. Galaxies retain their spirals and ellipses, stars held in their graceful curves. Even the tiniest droplets of water follow predictable paths, guided by the force that shapes reality itself. You feel a gentle sense of gratitude. For oceans, for skies, for stars. For the moon that lights the night. For the invisible thread that has held everything together, quietly, for billions of years. In this restored world, you can pause and reflect. You have imagined the absence of gravity, the untethered planets, drifting oceans, scattered stars. You have felt the universe unravel and experienced a cosmic emptiness beyond comprehension. And now, you have felt gravity return. Not as a force alone, but as a presence, a gentle, patient, and pervasive connection linking all things. As you lie here, gently aware of your own weight, you notice the beauty in this simple truth. Gravity is the shape of the universe, the rhythm of existence, and the quiet embrace that allows life and motion to persist. And as you drift into sleep, the world settles around you. Oceans rise and fall in their timeless rhythm. Air flows softly across valleys and forests. Mountains stand tall and steady. Planets and moons follow their ancient courses. The universe, vast and immeasurable, hums quietly in harmony. And you rest, gently, with the knowledge that you are part of this grand, unseen architecture, held, guided, and connected by the invisible hand of gravity, softly weaving the universe together, as it always has.